Up, guys? It's Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for the People podcast. We got Izzy on the line today from Powerlifting to Win. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Great. Well, it's good to have you. I've kind of read some of your stuff, but for people who don't know who you are, can you just introduce yourself just real quickly, like who you are and what you got going on right now?
So I would say probably, especially in the powerlifting community, what I'm best known for is being the creator of powerliftingtowin.com. It was probably like one of the first websites out there that was like strictly for powerlifting. But, you know, I'm also obviously a competitive lifter myself. My best lifts are 525, 355, and 605 at 181. I've also done 551 in reps at like 220. That was a really long time ago. But yeah, overall, that's basically who I am, I guess. I've been doing powerlifting for 8 or 9 years now.
Cool.
Been involved in the online community probably that entire time. And I also do some coaching as well, although not nearly as much as I used to in the past. I keep it a pretty small group nowadays. So yeah, I don't know if that hopefully that gives a decent overview of who I am.
Cool, man. So I want to kind of rewind a little bit, and I've been kind of involved with powerlifting around the same time, like 12, 13 years, and I know a lot has changed in the last 5 to 10 years for sure. What kind of what attracted you to powerlifting initially? Like, what made you decide you wanted to start lifting? Just even maybe before you even meet your meet, but just maybe just like lifting in general.
So it really started for me when I was I did some sort of like lifting from the time I was like 13 or 14, whether it was just in PE classes or going to gyms. But I really kind of fell in love with it at around like 18 when I read, of all things, Starting Strength by Mark Rippetoe. And at the time, it was really just something that I was doing during the summer, just because I wanted like something to focus on, like an athletic goal, because I had just finished school and there was no more sports for me to play anymore. So I just graduated high school. So weightlifting at that time, I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll put all of my energy into this and kind of see how it goes. And then through Starting Strength, I got basically way stronger than I ever really thought would be possible in a much quicker time period. So I went from like 160 pounds to maybe like 190 pounds in like 3 months, and got my squat up to like 365 for 5 reps. And at the time, you know, when I thought that like squatting 3 plates was impossible, that was really cool.
Yeah.
And then so through that community, the Starting Strength community, I found a book called I can't remember the name, but one of Ed Cohn is one of the main guys in the book. So it's not The Man, the Myth, the Legend, but it's a book written by Marty Gallagher. I think it's called The Purposeful Primitive.
Yeah, that's a good one. I that's at my parents' house, so I gotta dig that one up.
So I read that book, and it just kind of blew my mind. You know, I was reading about all these guys that had like 600 inclines.
Yeah, crazy stuff. Yeah.
I heard of lifts that I could, because at this time, you know, there's no Instagram. Even Facebook was not really big at this time.
Yeah, so people weren't really active on social. I mean, maybe besides like Mike Teixeira on like YouTube, I don't really, there wasn't really like a lot of lifters like on the internet that was really showcasing what they were doing.
No, not at all. Like if you typed in powerlifting on Google, and I'm not even kidding, back in this era, like the #1 search result would have been bodybuilding.com.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
And like that actually was the case. So you would look up like powerlifting information, and you just could not find it. So I'm looking through this book from Marty Gallagher that has like pictures of people like actually doing these lifts. Like, it's got like old school strongmen doing like half squats with 1,200 pounds and stuff.
Yeah.
It just kind of like blew my mind to see that all this stuff was possible. So that's what kind of got me researching powerlifting, and especially when I found out about Ed Cohn, because I kind of related to him. I was like, here's a guy who's like the exact same height as me, ended up being like one of the best powerlifters of all time. I was like, all right, well, maybe this sport is something that I can, because I'd always loved sports growing up. And when I graduated, I wasn't going to like do any college sports, and I wanted like some place to channel that.
Did you wrestle or play football or anything?
Yeah, so I wrestled, and
same here.
That was the main one. The main one for me was wrestling. But like I always, even like sports that I wasn't like on a team, I just loved to play sports. So like pick up football, pick up basketball, pick up baseball, pick up soccer. I played all of that, for fun. Kind of had a really active neighborhood, so pretty much like every day I was playing something.
Cool. So you went through starting strength. You started to see like a lot of these like old time strongman. I know that was definitely a really eye opening book for me too. Looking up like Paul Anderson and some of these guys that were like doing like
Exactly.
lifting 300-pound dumbbells overhead and all sorts of weird stuff. But
Yeah, like reading the stories of Paul Anderson, like having like half squat set up on his golf course where he would just like drink a gallon of milk all day as he walked from hole to hole. I was like, but there's some incredible stories in that
Sure.
book, and yeah, so that's what really got me on researching more about powerlifting, and then I kind of just got hooked on it. Like I guess like that's what happens to a lot of people, is you get introduced to the world of powerlifting, and then the more you look into it, the deeper it gets, and you're just like, whoa, I had no idea this stuff was possible.
Yeah. And what was so I guess around that time, like how long was it before you entered your first meet, and what was that like competing, and did you have anyone helping you? Did you do it yourself, or what was that
So
like?
the very first meet I did, I had nobody helping me.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing. That was probably like 3 years later.
Oh wow.
From the time, because like from the time that I read like the Purposeful Primitive, I'd probably been doing like basic strength training for like almost a year. And then by the time I actually worked up like the nerve to do a meet, and keeping in mind also that it wasn't just that easy to find meets back then.
It's good. Yeah, we used to have to travel a couple of hours even for like a local meet. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So you couldn't just like go on Google and go on like Powerlifting Watch or all these Facebook groups and like find a meet. You had to like actually ask people, and yeah, so it was like once I actually found one, I did one, had no idea what I was doing. I think I might have gone like 4 for 9 or something because I just went way too heavy on everything.
Yep.
Like tried to set PRs on my second attempts on every lift, and then shortly after that, I actually met some like real powerlifters at that meet who kind of helped me out and started training at a real gym, and it kind of went downhill from there, or however that saying goes.
I gotcha. Cool. And so if you had to do it all over again, do you think you would have competed sooner, or do you feel like that was kind of like when you were personally ready? Because I know like a lot. I'm sure you get a lot of people like that are starting out. They see like everyone kind of follows like the top like 0.01% of lifters, and a lot of times people might feel insignificant, or I'm not ready to compete, or I'm not deserving of competing. So like, what's kind of like your take on that for someone starting out? Like, when's a good time frame for them to start like actually doing a meet?
As soon as they have the form down, is like kind of my opinion. Like as soon as you have the form down, you should start doing meets. And it's for me, it's because it's as much about just putting yourself in that environment and being around those people, and it just brings you up. It's just like anything else. Like an example that I use with people, even though it's like kind of corny, is like Michael Jordan would never have been Michael Jordan if he just played by himself on an empty hoop somewhere.
That's
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just just being around other people who have the same goals as you, it brings you up, especially. Even if doesn't matter if you're like top 0.1%, because at local meets, there's not that many people that are top 1% there. But it's people that are actually, there's going to be people at your level. There's some people just above you, just behind you. And that's what's really going to push you. That sense of community, being around other people who really believe in it, who have the same goals. I just don't think you can replace that.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think also just kind of going back to what you said too, like I think you said you met some people that actually ended up helping you out, and you never really know who you're going to meet either at these meets and stuff. You might like meet like a lifelong friend, you might meet a future coach maybe that you work with, and I think that even definitely if you're still like kind of nervous, go watch a meet. Go now there's meets like every weekend almost. You can go drive 20, 30 minutes and probably find a meet almost every weekend, depending on where you are, of course, but. I know definitely like on the West Coast and on the East Coast we have quite a bit, and then there's stuff like in between. But there's a lot more opportunities out there, which is really cool. I know for us that have kind of been in the game for like a little over a decade, it's definitely evolved a lot. So I know that since then, I know you kind of put on some body weight. I guess you got up to as heavy as I don't know, like 220 or something like that, and
even heavier than that, man. I got to like 245.
Okay, yeah. So I kind of went through like a similar thing. So I'm just kind of curious, like, was that a conscious decision where you just try to focus more on strength, or tell me about like how your body was changing and what was going through your head, and what was going on through like the next couple of years of competing for you.
So like that was an interesting one because like as far as the psychology behind it goes, like I think I was just like a little bit delusional, but. Like thinking that more of what I was gaining was muscle than it really was. But the reason why I did that is just because like that's what like the environment that I was in at the time. Everybody said you have to gain weight. But one of the big problems with that is that I wasn't taking like the same supplements that the people who were telling me to do that were taking. So
right.
like at the time that like it would have been a completely different result if I was.
Right.
But I was eating all the food and doing all the lifting, and it just didn't make sense for me to put on like, I think I put on like, oh man, like 50 pounds of body weight in like 6 months.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And it was just way too fast, and I did get much stronger. So that happened. So that's kind of like why you can kind of justify it as it's happening. Because if strength is your main goal and you're getting stronger, it's not like that hard to keep going when you're setting PRs all the time. Because when you're always gaining weight, you always feel pretty good, and you're always setting PRs. But it just got to the point where I was like, man, I was probably like 35-40% body fat, struggling to get up the stairs and stuff. And I was like, all right, I got to change this.
Yeah, no good. I don't know if this ever happened to you. I got to a point where like my squat and bench was going up as my body weight was going up, but I got to the point where my deadlift actually stalled for 3 years. I didn't because I just got so fat, and it's just one of those things where I think also that was kind of the information at the time. I know there was a lot of like the old school Dave Tate and Jim Wendler eat like a case of Oreos and stuff. I don't know if you kind of were kind of the guy. I mean, the information out there is a lot better now.
On your pizza. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of drinking an extra can of Coke. I mean, this is like kind of the information that was out there. And and I guess a part of it maybe was like I said was more multiply lifting. There was a little bit less of a consequence with some of the geared lifting and stuff. I'm not sure if you ever messed around with that, but
not too much.
Yeah, I know you said you did some meets and wraps and stuff, but
yeah. So but the guys that I trained with definitely did multiply. So that's probably one of the reasons why they were giving me that advice was because it does work a little better for the multiply scene to keep gaining like that.
Sure. So what was like the turning point for you that you were like because I like I said I know like I've kind of recently the past like year and a half 2 years I've definitely been a lot more health conscious, and I've kind of put some of my strength and performance in the back burner. It sounds to me like your lifts are still like at a point where they're going well, but I'm sure initially they probably went down as you lost the weight. So what was kind of like the turning point or like the last straw where you're like I need to like get healthy, and what was that process like kind of going from I guess 250 now back down to I guess you're probably like 180, 175 now or something like that?
Yeah, 175.
Yeah.
The first time that that was like the first time that I'd really cut weight because like I was always underweight growing up. Like, I was like 140 pounds when I was like 17. So getting up to like over 200 was unnatural for me in the first place.
Right.
But it was like I was like one of those people that used to complain about not being able to eat enough, and then I like fixed it. Now it's like the opposite. It's like hard for me to not eat a lot.
Sure.
Now. But when the first time I cut weight, I did not know what I was doing. So the advice out there was mostly like bodybuilding advice. And so what I really did was my thought process was like I'm not going to eat like a bodybuilder. It's a little too much for what I'm trying to do. So I just ate less of everything, of protein. It wasn't like I kept my protein the same and consciously reduced my fats and carbs. I just had no idea what I was doing. So I added in more cardio and just ate less. And predictably, I lost a lot of like strength doing that.
Right.
But the straw that broke the camel's back for me was we went on a Mother's Day hike, and like my 50-year-old mother was having way less trouble on the hike than me. I was the last person in the group, way behind everybody, huffing and puffing, cussing and sweating, and it was just like, all right, this is ridiculous. Like I can't keep up with like my mom, and she's like was like 50 something at the time. So I was like, all right, I just don't want to be this heavy anymore.
Yeah, I think that's big when you start to like you're starting to miss out on some of those day-to-day family stuff, or just like, yeah, I'd like to go on a hike, or I'd like to maybe go bike riding or paddle boarding, or just like kind of normal stuff. Or I was out in San Diego for the U.S. Open, coaching, and my family lives out there. And what was cool is this year, one of my cousin lives out there, and we went out to one of his friend's house, and she has like a beach volleyball like court, which is like unbelievable. But I was able to actually like do it, which was like nice. I wasn't like worried about like pulling a hamstring or whatever, or just being so out of breath. And it was just nice to be able to do that and not be so worried like, am I gonna like get hurt or like whatever, or am I gonna just make a fool of myself? Yeah, am I gonna which was it was really kind of comforting. And I know like in the past like that would have been a real struggle, or it just wouldn't have happened. I would have been kind of like on the sidelines and just kind of missed out on some of like those great experiences. So And I think like when you're at an elite level, like I think it's important to say. I know you've kind of said this in some of your videos and stuff. Like when you're at that top level, it's like it's not gonna be 100% healthy, right?
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
but for most of us that just want to get a little bit better, we're kind of in the sport recreationally. Most of us that are probably watching this or listening are not going to be setting all-time world records. So I
Yeah.
think it's good to have like the good balance of health and performance. And then if you have a meet coming up, maybe you're a little bit more aggressive with focus on performance for a certain period of time. But most of the time, day to day, and throughout the year, you have a good balance of like health and performance and whatever your goals
Yeah.
are. So.
I mean, yeah, I completely agree with that. Like a great example of that lately is that did you see that video of Ronnie Coleman that came out? And like
Bits and I've more like
yeah.
I heard like but yeah, it's kind of scary and it's like man, it's like
Yeah.
what's like the price?
Yeah.
What's the
But
price of that? So
when I compare like what he did to like say Jay Cutler, who is like kind of known for the opposite of like doing everything possible to take care of his body. So it's like
yeah, Jay looks like he's doing pretty well from at least the outside, but
yeah. He still trains all the time. Like
yeah.
I actually go to the same gym as him, see him in there. He moves fine,
Right,
looks healthy.
So there you go.
So I mean, so there's like my thought process of that is like, yeah, at the very top, it's not going to be healthy, but that doesn't mean that you have to go out of your way to ignore your health.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you can still be doing everything possible to maximize your health within whatever your restrictions are. It's the same as like, let's say somebody only has, I don't know, 5 hours to train per week. That doesn't mean they have to do nothing. Like you can still get in a solid 5 hours and do your best with that. Same thing. Like even if you have to push your body to the limits because you are one of those people that wants to go for all-time world records and you have the capability to do so. That doesn't mean you just ignore the things that you can do for your health, like making sure that you're at least eating a balanced, nutritious diet and getting enough sleep and having your blood levels checked every once in a while to make sure you're not on the verge of death and stuff like that.
Sure.
So just because it's not perfect doesn't mean you don't have to do anything.
I think that's true, and one thing I try to like kind of preach to my guys and girls that I work with, when it comes to longevity, besides just health, like the longer you're able to compete, you're gonna end up performing better in the long haul. The longer you're in the sport, there's just more potential for you to kind of climb the ranks. So I know, like using myself as an example, I've lost about like 90 pounds, like all time of like body weight. So I'm not able to like lift as much as I did, weighing 250 as I did at 340. But I'm getting stronger at this body weight. I'm getting stronger. I'm hitting new PRs. I'm establishing new records at this body weight, and I could always start to kind of work back towards, kind of those all-time records that I have for myself. I'm not like in such a rush to kind of get back up to like, just for example, I squatted 600 the other day. I've done 750 in reps. I did 600 the other day. That's a big difference, but like I said, being 340 versus 250, I gotta like kind of put that in perspective. There's gonna be some drop off, but the fact that I'm trending upward at this body weight, that's a good sign. So
yeah, and that was one of the hardest things for me too mentally was like kind of staying in it, but I did eventually like break the PRs that I had at 240,
it's
at
awesome.
190, 185. But it took me like 4 years.
People don't want to hear that, But yeah.
And I would be lying to say that there wasn't like periods of time in there where I kind of like lost faith in myself.
Yeah.
In my ability to ever get back to those numbers. And but eventually it happened, and once I did that, it was kind of like a big hurdle. And now I'm trying to do the same thing where it's like I have these PRs that I set at 185 and 190. Now I'm like 175, and I'm maybe 5% off of those. But I'm trying to chip away and get back to where I was again.
I think when it comes to body weight and things like that, like you will get some results quickly by just adding weight and things like that and cutting corners. But I always say it's kind of like easy come, easy go with stuff like that too. And I know like if you kind of really put in the time, like it seems like you have been, if you kind of just keep chipping away, like you said, a lot of times those strength gains are a lot more sustainable also.
True.
So it's just these are just something to consider, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. Because like I said, it's something I'm kind of going through now, and also even just selfishly for myself, like I know like there's definitely been some times I'm like, am I going to be able to? Because I'd like to squat over 700 raw again. Like that's definitely a goal of mine. I'd like to do over 900 pounds in a squat suit again, but I know it's going to take some time. And I know like I'm sure you have other goals, and we'll kind of get it. I want to definitely talk about your website in a little bit, and like for me, like coaching is like my main priority still, and my business is a little bit above like my own performance. So I think those are things to consider too, like what are your priorities and things like that, and where does powerlifting kind of fall on that list. So, um, we can kind of transition to that a little bit. I definitely want to talk a little bit more about your website because I think it's a great resource. I'm not sure um, if you do other things like outside of this kind of fitness strength community.
Yeah, I do now.
Yeah, so because you have a lot of great resources on there, and I'm just curious, what was the motivation for building the site? Did you want to I guess it seems like when we started, we didn't really have kind of somewhere to go. So was that kind of your motivation, or what made you want to start that?
That was exactly it. So when I was first starting the website, I kind of narrowed it down to 2 domain names, and one of them was all about powerlifting, and the other one was powerlifting to win. And I was like, I couldn't really decide which one that I wanted it to be. And I ended up going with powerlifting to win, simply because I just wanted there to be at least one resource on the internet that was for people who were taking the sport seriously.
Yeah.
Because at the time, there just wasn't anything. It wasn't I named it that because I thought I was going to be the best powerlifter of all time or something. It was because I wanted a website where if somebody wanted to ask a question what are the best shoes for squats for powerlifting, where you could actually get an answer from somebody that wasn't just dude, who cares about your shoes? Just squat heavy or something, or
right.
just get chucks like everybody else. I wanted there to be a site that, or because like I said, when I actually started my website, when you type powerlifting on Google, and I'm not exaggerating, you got Wikipedia, you got a Wikipedia entry about the sport of powerlifting that gave you a quick rundown on what it was, and it was the sport of powerlifting is where you get 3 attempts on the squat, bench, and deadlift. It was that was one of the top results. Another one was bodybuilding.com. It was a powerlifting workout article. So it wasn't a program. It was here's a powerlifting workout that you can try to mix in your routine.
Weird stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so there was today it's completely different, where there's just amazing information coming out of every corner of the internet. But when I first started it, my motivation was just I was on forums a lot. So I was in these communities.
The forums were a lot bigger back in the day,
yeah.
I know.
Now it's Facebook groups, but
yeah.
But I was on all those forums, and I participated on them all the time. And so I was just trying to collect information that I was learning from other powerlifters, that I was learning on the forums, and putting it in one place where people could use it as a reference. That was really my only goal with it. I didn't have any idea that you could do. Online coaching wasn't really a thing when I started that website.
No, not really.
It didn't exist. So I didn't start my website with this idea that I was going to parlay that into an online coaching business or any kind of business. I was just putting information out there that I was using for myself, almost this is what I currently believe is the best. I'm just going to share this information. Hopefully it helps somebody. And that's kind of what the whole website was.
Cool. Yeah, I've been trying to do a similar thing. I'm definitely not as organized as you, and like I said, obviously for me, coaching takes up the majority of my time. So there's only so much time I have to devote to the website. So I'm trying to do a better job at delegating. But I think it's just the fact of you just documenting what you're doing. I think is very very helpful for a lot of people because they can kind of see the progression. They can see your struggles. It makes it a lot more relatable. I think is good, and that's one of the things. For me. I don't claim to be such the best lifter ever, but I think part of being a good coach is understanding what your athletes are going through and actually kind of going through it themselves. And I think that's very helpful. And it's one of the reasons why I still compete, just so I have a pulse on what's going on, if this program is working, is this going to beat, because a lot of times, sometimes I see, I'm not sure, I haven't looked into your kind of programs and stuff too much, but I know that you've kind of dissected a lot of programs, which I think is cool. Because a lot of the stuff that I kind of grew up more of in the West Side era, where kind of intensity was a little bit more of the king of what people would focus on. Now the pendulum has swung toward volume and frequency a lot more.
Yeah.
And sometimes I look at some of these workouts that other people are doing. I'm I would be dead. And obviously maybe everyone's schedule is different, but. I sometimes wonder if any of these coaches have actually done these workouts themselves, or if they've ever been actually has any as a human done them. So it's just kind of maybe you can kind of comment on that, and then I have some follow-up questions. But
that was one of the biggest realizations that I had from working with a wide variety of people. Because before I ever got into powerlifting coaching, I became a starting strength coach. So I coached them. With that, I did in-person coaching with that model, maybe 3 dozen clients that I had over the course of a couple years. So I was pretty familiar with like coaching people in that context, like beginners. But what I saw when I started doing online coaching was, I'd have just like, as an example, a 5'2" male who spent most of his life doing computer programming, never played sports. And then I'd work with a guy who was 6'4", played every sport in the book, has been lifting since he was like 12. And I would see their response was completely different. Or I'd work with a super heavyweight male who got better results benching 1 time a week. And then I'd work with a 148-pound female who needed to bench 4 times a week. And I just began to realize, like, with the demographic is so important with how you put the programs together. Like, so it kind of made me realize that, because I did break down, like, all these different programs, a lot of those programs would be, like, much closer to ideal for the person that wrote them. But lot of time, it's like when you have, like, let's say, like, a 220, 242, 275 male powerlifter, hitting those split programs where you squat once a week, deadlift once a week, maybe 1 heavy bench day, 1 light bench day, that works way better than these crazy frequency programs. But when you get to like the 165, 148, 181 guys in the IPF, sometimes they just seem to do way better with the frequency stuff. But it's a matter of like demographics and understanding the situation, which when I think I was first doing those program reviews, I had no context of that because I hadn't worked with a broad enough group of people.
I think another thing that's important to note that a lot of people kind of miss out, like besides all of the body types and sport background and stuff, also like you mentioned, a lot of these IPF lifters, they have really high skill level. And if you're a real high skill level, you're not going to be in bad positions as often, and that's going to kind of factor into recovery and stuff too. So if you're kind of a beginner lifter, if you squat really poorly and you're trying to squat every day, I think that could be really problematic also. So you could always, I think, starting off on the lower end and then kind of building up your frequency as your skill gets better, and if you're a lighter weight lifter, and then kind of see, like you said, am I responding well to this? Am I getting too beat up? And, you could always kind of adjust up or down, but, and then if you're going to make a change, make a small change and see how you do with that small change. Don't go from squatting once a week to squatting 4 times a week, things like that. Because I kind of see these things like that. People want to go from like doing nothing to training 5 days a week, and it's like that's a really easy way to burn out like fast.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. One of the things that I've seen too is that, and it's an easy thing to do, and I've done it myself, is a lot of times people get fixated on the idea that like if they just had the right program, that their progress would skyrocket out of control. So they see some program that's vastly different than what they're doing. Let's say some elite lifters doing it. Whether it's like Larry Wills or John Hack or whoever it may be, and they decide, okay, well, this guy's doing something completely different than me. So it must be that I'm just doing it completely wrong. So let me do a completely different style of training.
They jump ship completely,
and ultimately, it's like that's not what it's about. Like you said, you really want to adjust it based on the results that you're actually getting, because that's what matters at the end of the day. Just because one guy can recover from 40 sets of bench a week doesn't mean that you're missing out on some secret program that's going to get your bench to 400 pounds in a year. It's probably just you can't recover from that the way that guy can.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I also think too, like I don't know how often one of the things like we really focus in at least my in-person stuff. We train a lot in groups, and sometimes your environment's a huge factor too. The environment you're in, like kind of that nature versus nurture effect. So you could be on the snowflake program, but if you're not putting in the work in and you're not executing properly and you're not like kind of putting in actual effort. And also the psychology of it. Do you actually believe it's good for you? Do you believe it's working? There's so many factors to consider. And that being said, I think sometimes it can be very confusing. So do you have any advice for people to like, how do you filter through information to know if it's good or not? Like, how do you know? Because there's so much stuff out there. And I know with myself, like I'm not like the most technical, science-y kind of person, but I have a lot of experience. And I think that's like kind of my strong suit. Like I have a lot of experience working with people for, 10, 11, 12, 13 years. So I try not to be so sciencey, but how do you know when someone's kind of blowing smoke and when someone's actually like has a good product, good information like out there? Like how do you kind of decipher that and kind of filter through it?
So I think there's always a couple of filters that I want to use. One is you want to weigh it against the totality of like your experiential evidence. So like, that 10, 11 years that you have, right? Maybe a beginner lifter can't quite use that, but even somebody that has 2 or 3 or 4 years should have seen enough where they can have at least somewhat of a BS filter.
Right.
And you just want to make sure that whatever information that you're hearing doesn't completely get stuck in one of your BS filters. So if somebody's saying this, that, and the other, and if they don't have the personal results, none of their lifters have the personal results, that should set off a red flag.
Right.
If what they're saying is completely against 10 years of experience, that should set off a red flag.
Yeah.
If it directly contradicts not like one or two studies, but the massive research out there, that should be a red flag. So, I mean, I think that's kind of what I try to do is approach it from, a holistic standpoint and just see if there's anything about it that, because like an exceptional claim should require exceptional evidence. So if somebody is saying something that you haven't heard somewhere else.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So like if somebody's saying the best way to get bench progress is to bench 12 times a week, twice a day or something.
You better have a lot. You need a lot to back that up. You need a lot of stuff.
Exactly. They should be showing you tons of evidence to support that. Whereas if you hear something that is more in the realm of what everybody's doing, like somebody saying, "Hey, your best bet is probably between 1 and 3 times a week," then you're probably not going to need to go and like dig out the journals and read through all the PubMed studies to see if that's BS.
But that.
I mean, it's tough because there is so much information out there. But I feel like a lot of it is you just have to just stay in the sport and keep collecting that evidence and seeing people's stories, and you'll kind of start to develop your own filter for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the biggest one for me is just if somebody's saying something crazy, they better have something crazy to back it up.
I think that's a really good point, and I like that's a good quote. I know you mentioned Eddie Cohn before, and I know Eddie Cohn was saying like a lot of times he's noticed, because he's been obviously around a lot longer than either of us. He's kind of noticed that people, as lifters kind of age, they kind of end up the pendulum swings back to like when they're like retired, they end up kind of training how they used to like when they started. He's kind of like, it's just something that kind of really rang home with me. I thought that was very interesting. And I think a lot of times, we end up kind of trying all this stuff in the middle in our intermediate kind of phase, but we end up kind of taking out a lot of the BS. We end up taking out a lot of the fluff as we get older, more experienced, and we kind of go back to something a little bit more simple. And simple is not always necessarily easy, but a lot of times it's like just really getting good at the basics. Really, like I said, just whether it's a linear progression or just kind of increasing volume over time, increasing intensity over time. These really simple progressions and kind of eliminating a lot of like those really fancy stuff. Because a lot of times I think as human nature, we're always looking for that magic bullet. Yeah. But a lot of times the answer is like just time, it's consistency, it's effort, and a lot of times like I think people they kind of abandon a program or abandon like an approach right before they're about to kind of break through and kind of like makes, because sometimes the answer is just it takes time, and I think a lot of people more people need to hear that, and more people I think need to be patient, because we especially with social media we see all these snapshots of all these great lifters, but we don't see like all the time it took for them to get to that point.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where you kind of just whatever you have in your head, you'll tend to focus on. And so it's like you hear a story of some person adding 80 pounds to their squat in 4 months. And so now you like latch onto that, and you start to look for what crazy thing that you can adjust to get results like that. Versus at the end of the day, like we all kind of mentally know that, hey, if you could add, let's just say something really simple, like if you could add 10 pounds to your squat, 10 pounds to your deadlift, and 5 pounds to your bench every training cycle.
That's amazing. Amazing.
and just do that consistently every year. That would be amazing progress. But it's just like you said, it's that human nature of feeling like I'm missing a secret. Yeah. I really feel like that's what it is. It's like people feel like, and I've been there myself so many times, where there's a secret that I'm missing, and that's the reason why I'm not progressing at the same level as these other guys. Whereas you're probably not missing a secret. It's just that consistency and time, and kind of accepting that, hey, there is a certain level of talent that influences people's results in the sport, and it's maybe not necessarily due to some sexy magic program that you're not running.
Cool, man. I think that's great. I think that kind of definitely will help a lot of people. Just at least, I think it can be very confusing out there. So another thing I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit, just again, more so for myself, but I think also for the people listening out there, going back to like your body weight, when you were dropping weight, did you have like some sort of nutrition plan or coaching, or did you have any like strategies? Because I'm sure there's probably some people out there that they want to get leaner, but they want to maintain their strength. Do you have any advice from like a nutrition or lifestyle standpoint for people that are looking to kind of get a little bit leaner, but still like, eventually kind of come back to powerlifting and come back to strength?
So, I mean, I have a ton on that, like a ton, because I spent like years learning that after doing that initial cut, so that I would never like mess it up that bad again.
Yeah.
But like, some of the key principles to me are obviously you want to learn about macronutrition. So that's one of the biggest ones is learning the importance of protein, how much protein you actually need, how many carbs you need, and how much fat that you need to actually fuel your workouts. And then the other one is that just keep your calories as high as possible while still losing the amount of weight that's acceptable.
Very good point.
I honestly think you should be going for like maybe 0.5% of your body weight per week if your goal is to maintain performance. So I think that's one of the big problems is that people will go for like 2 or 3 pound weight loss per week.
Too much.
But it's way too much. And so I think, just losing the weight slower, making sure that you're actually tracking what you eat. And I think the other thing is doing it cyclically. So like 8 to 12 week diet periods, followed by 1 to 3 week diet breaks at maintenance, really, really helps.
Yeah, I think going back to what you said, I'm actually kind of curious to see. Let's see, I've kind of been I've been maintaining. Yeah, so I guess it's June now. I've been maintaining like 250 since like the end of April, beginning of May. So kind of like, and that's now my strength's starting to kind of come back up. It's like surprise, It's like actually like you can't be in a deficit forever. I think that's a really kind of really key thing. And then like I said, at some point like you can't take more food away. You're just not going to be able to. So that's really good. So yeah, keep going. I just want to kind of make that point because I think sometimes people again they see this snapshot, they see this before and after picture, but it's not going to just trend down like all the time. There's going to be peaks and valleys in there. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's why I really suggest doing it in 8 to 12 week intervals, because that way you're going to minimize the accumulation of those negative effects that happen when you're just dieting nonstop for long periods of time. And those couple weeks at maintenance oftentimes can help you get back, a couple percentage points on your strength.
Yeah, it's great.
Before you head back into the dieting phase, if that's what you want. But I think the biggest thing that I learned for me personally is that I don't ever want to get to the point where I have to do super long diets again. So I want to keep the range tighter. So like let's say I'm going to be a 181 lifter, right? I probably don't want to get above 190 just so that I don't have a period where I have to diet for like 16 weeks. Assuming, depending on how much water weight you want to cut and all that.
Yeah, it's another conversation.
Exactly. But my point being just like I don't want to get into a position again where I have to actually diet for like 6 months straight, because that's where I feel like you lose a lot.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. This is just kind of going back to what you said, because I try to encourage my lifters to kind of be at the weight they kind of need to be at the beginning of the training cycle, not actually diet into a meet if possible, so they could actually be in a little bit of a surplus. What's kind of your take on that? And as far as like, because it is a weight class sport, and some people want to be competitive. So, what's kind of your take on that, and any strategies for like going into like a competition phase to kind of make sure that you can still make weight, but also perform at a high level?
So, I mean, I completely agree with what you said. It's pretty much a worst case scenario, in my opinion, that you're in a caloric deficit during a peak. Because people have to really think about what a peak is. What you're doing is you're doing basically the minimum amount to maintain your current fitness levels, while you allow fatigue to drop at a faster rate. So you're by necessity doing very low volumes, usually, compared to what you normally do. And we know that volume is the primary stimulus for hypertrophy. So if you're in that period in a caloric deficit, you're just asking for trouble. You're asking to lose muscle during the most important part of your training cycle. So I feel like any dieting that you need to do should be done before those last 2 weeks. So if that means coming in at the beginning of a training cycle at the weight that you should be, perfect. But yeah, the whole water cutting thing, it really just depends. Like I have people that just are dead set on doing it, and I feel like you just have to set the expectations. It's like, look, okay, if you're dead set on doing this, you're going to be weaker than you were throughout the training cycle. Can you mentally accept that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people say they can, but then when they do it,
I don't get. It's like Yeah, I've dealt with that coaching many times, and sometimes it's like we talked about this, but then
Yeah.
actually, yeah, I think the perspective is everything. I think in life too, I try to, and that's one of the reasons why I've been kind of chronicling my lifts and my weight loss and stuff. I could be very upset about hitting a 600-pound squat because it's 150 pounds off my best raw with wrap squat, or I could be like, hey, this is the heaviest I've done at this body weight, and then be proud of that, and my weights are trending up. So it's just really like how you look at it, and then in the case of a meet, just realize that if you cut weight versus not cutting weight, just expect there might be a little dip in performance.
Yeah.
There, and if you don't get a dip in performance, then my hat's off to you.
Right.
That's great. Celebrate, but just realize that my kind of thing is if someone is trying to get like nationally ranked, qualify for like a national level meet or break an all-time world record, break an American record, those are kind of some times where you should maybe consider cutting weight. But other than that, especially if it's like your first meet or something, I always say just weigh what you weigh. Focus on lifting the most you can. I don't know if you ever talked with like Brandon Lilly and stuff. We always talked about like if you've hit a certain weight at a certain body weight, oftentimes it's easier. Okay, now I hit 700-pound squat. Chances are you could probably get back to that point if you do a cut or if you cut weight or whatever. So hit the weight first, get stronger first, and then we can always worry about getting leaner or dropping a weight class like later. So that's kind of my kind of deal with that too.
I mean, I'm on board with you 100% there. The only thing for me is like if it's the first meet, I'm just like dead set against any weight cut.
Yeah, I agree.
Like,
there's too many other variables.
Yeah, like even if you think that you're gonna qualify for nationals or set a world record, it's your first meet. Just don't do it. Don't because that first meet, having a bad experience there could turn you off from the sport for your whole life.
Yeah.
So just don't do it. Just because I'm actually like a little bit more like hard line on the weight cut thing where I tell people I'm like, look, you're going to lose strength. Now I know that there's like a very small percentage of people that don't, but I just tell everybody you're going to lose strength, and that way that they understand what they're actually sacrificing. Because what I've seen is if it is more than like on a 24-hour weigh-in, if it's more than like 3 to 5% of body weight, like 98% of the time they do lose like pretty significant amount of strength.
Some strength, yeah.
And then on a 2-hour weight cut, it's almost like any weight that you cut.
Yeah, I sometimes I see like, well, I mean, yeah, I don't want to pick on anyone, but I've seen some people at like had some lifters in the prime time, and I've seen some of the people that have done substantial weight cuts, and you see, man, you see what they did in training, and then you see like what they do at meet day, and I'm just like, it's like, man, it's like it's serious. It's like they're like a different person sometimes, or
it's like 5% less sometimes,
Or sometimes I know I think one of the some lifters I think one of sometimes lifters don't even make it, and then they don't that's a whole other thing. But
oh yeah, that's bad.
So it's like you do all this work and then for what? And you can't even actually compete. So cool, man. So one other question I wanted to ask you too. If you have some advice for people starting out, what's like maybe some good general advice for someone that's looking to get into the sport? Like, what would you tell them just to kind of help them kind of get started on their powerlifting journey?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think probably the big thing that comes to mind for me right now is make sure that you emphasize technique, especially at the beginning. Like a lot of people, and I don't want people to be one of those individuals that like resets the weight back down to one plate every time there's like a minor twitch that went wrong. But at the same time, there's too many people, and I did this myself, so that's why I'm like so keenly aware of it, that push the weight too quickly. It's like just get your form perfect from the beginning, or reasonably close enough, and that way you're building this foundation that's easier to build on, because it's so much harder to go back and fix bad habits than it is to just get it right in the first place. And then I guess the other thing is that in today's world with all the social media stuff, kind of resist those extremes. Just resist wanting to do the squat every day or all that stuff. Just stick to a basic program. And I know this sounds self-serving considering for both of us, but get a coach. They're gonna cut your learning curve down so much, help you prevent so many mistakes. So for me, it's like technique, get a coach, and resist the temptation to try all these new crazy stuff every 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think just this is hard. The sport is hard.
Yeah.
To be really good is hard. it is very fun and rewarding. But I think that, like you said, whether it's getting a coach, getting a group of guys, that know what they're doing, that have been there, done that, it's just easier when you have support. I always say there's strength in numbers. So if you have a team behind you, if you have a coach behind you, it just makes things a lot easier, and it kind of puts things in perspective. I know, like, one thing. I think one of the things that I'm able to help out, especially on game day, whether it's picking numbers and stuff, it kind of takes you don't get so romantic about certain numbers or whatever. It kind of you're always going to be a little bit biased when you're trying to coach yourself. You're never going to really do the things you really need to do. You're always going to kind of err on the side of focusing on your strengths. You're not going to maybe address your weaknesses. You're always going to kind of think a little bit like if you want, maybe they want to hit a 300-pound bench, but 290 or 295 is there. A coach is going to be able to make those decisions for you, whereas a lot of times you're not going to be able to make those tough decisions for yourself. And it's good to collaborate on it. It doesn't have to be like the coach is the boss, but you at least have that perspective. You have someone to bounce ideas off of, and you're in this together. That's what I always say. You're in this together, so you don't have to do it alone. If you have questions, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. A group, if you can find a good group with at least a couple people in it that are super experienced, that's almost the best way to go if you can find that. Because then you get that, you get the expertise of kind of the coaching, but you also get that camaraderie and that consistent environment with real-time feedback, which is almost, impossible to replace. Where when you have somebody who's actually there in person telling you, hey, this is what you're doing, and then you have people encouraging you during the lifts, I think that makes a tremendous difference to the progress and how much fun you have. Because let's be honest, that's another thing is you got to have fun and at least enjoy what you're doing on some level to continue in the sport for a long time.
Cool, man. I want to recap a couple. I thought there was a couple of really good nuggets. I just want to kind of recap. I really liked what you said. If someone has exceptional results, if they have exceptional claims, they should have exceptional evidence, right? I thought that was really big. So I think that's if you can have one filter, I think that's a really good one. So if someone's really claiming like 100 pounds on your squat or whatever, then those results should show up time and time again. I think that's good. Don't cut weight for your first meet is a big one. Is a big one. Realize this stuff takes time. So if you're trying to adjust a weight class or whatever, you're better off making small progress over time. Easy come, easy go. So that was another big one. Try and use a coach. Find a group. Don't be afraid to ask for help. So I think those are some of the biggest takeaways. And I think don't sacrifice your health for just for those quick gains. Just take your time, focus on longevity, and I think that's going to allow you the best results in the long run. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that I would add that you said that I think is a big key is the point about focus. What you focus on tends to be what you're going to see. So one example of that I've always loved is there's this exercise that people will have you do sometimes where they basically tell you, hey, look around at everything in the room that is brown, and then they have you for 5 seconds, and they have you close your eyes, and they'll ask you, hey, what in the room is green? But all you can think about is all the brown shit.
No idea.
And that's kind of a metaphor for life. If you're just looking for shit everywhere, you'll find it. Whereas if you tell your brain to look for the positive things, like, hey, I 600 maybe less than what I've done in the past, but it's a PR at this body weight. It's a PR compared to what I did last month. So it's moving in the right direction. And that's key because there's nothing more demotivating in powerlifting than it doesn't even have to be true that you're not progressing, but just feeling like you're not progressing will kill a powerlifter's motivation, in my experience, faster than anything else. So figuring out ways to play with your mind and keep your perspective positive is so important, in my opinion.
I think that this is something you'll appreciate, but I know one thing my business coach talks about as far as questions and stuff, he says ask yourself what's the best thing that happened today? What's the best thing that happened in my workout? If you could stack on those things, stack on your successes, that's going to be a lot better than always picking apart. And going back to what you said too, there's a lot of people I see. It's oh, my form wasn't perfect, so I can't. It's at some point, it's okay if it's okay if it's not 100% perfect. You got to put in the effort and don't be so critical of yourself. I see this a lot with with new beginners, and they compare themselves too much to the really elite people, and it's focus on is this the best you can do today? Is this the best that you can do today? And just kind of build on that. I think that's, like I said, that's gonna help in all areas of your life. So it was really great chatting with you, Izzy. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, check out your site, or find you on social or anything like that?
Yeah, so you can find me. My website is just www.powerliftingtowin.com, and then on social media, I'm on Instagram at Izzy Narvez, so IZZY, Narvaez. And then if you want to shoot me an email if you have any questions, it's Izzy, so Izzy at powerliftingtowin.com. And those are probably the quickest ways to reach out to me, either through Instagram, email, or the site.
Yeah, I'll just say like the site is a great resource. I wish I had as many articles and stuff as you. A little jealous, but it's a great resource. I think what I love most about you, Izzy, is I feel like you're really relatable and you keep things very like real and honest. And that's not always that's not always common in the industry. So I appreciate that as a coach. I appreciate that as a lifter, and I think that more people, like I said, need to come together. And like I said, we don't need to. We got two people here that maybe we have different ideas, but we can agree on a lot of stuff. And I think that if we come together more, we're going to just help. The rising tide raises all ships. So I think that's a good way to kind of end. Definitely give Izzy a follow. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please like, please share, please subscribe on iTunes and give us a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.